A big German shepherd stood alone in the middle of a quiet forest road. His fur was dirty, his body thin, and one of his legs was bleeding. He was shaking, not from the cold, but from fear and pain. His ears twitched at the sound of an engine coming closer. A small forest truck stopped a few feet away, and the dog froze. Inside, the truck sat Ranger Ben, a lonely forest park ranger who often drove these empty roads. Ben had no family, and his days were usually quiet and slow. But this moment was different. He saw the dog and slowed down. At first, he thought it was just a lost pet, or maybe a stray. But then something strange happened. The German shepherd didn't run away. Instead, he looked straight into Ben's eyes. It wasn't just a normal look. It was deep, almost human. His eyes seemed to say, "Please help me." Ben stepped out of the truck slowly, not wanting to scare the dog. "Hey, boy," he said softly, crouching down. The dog didn't move. He just stared for another moment, then turned around and slowly started walking toward the trees. Ben watched, confused. Why wasn't the dog running away? Where was he going? Then the dog stopped, turned his head, and looked back at Ben, as if asking him to follow. Ben felt something in his heart, a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity, concern, maybe even purpose. He grabbed his flashlight and followed the dog into the forest. They walked deeper and deeper into the woods. The tall trees closed in above them, and the sounds of birds faded. The forest became quiet, too quiet. The dog moved slowly, limping a little, but he kept going. Ben followed carefully, stepping over roots and ducking under branches. After a few minutes, the dog stopped near a group of bushes. He let out a soft whine and stepped aside. Ben moved closer and looked into the bushes. His eyes widened. There, lying on the ground, was another German shepherd. This one even worse off than the first. The second dog was trapped in an old, rusty animal trap. His paw was caught between the metal teeth, and dried blood covered the ground around him. The poor animal was barely breathing. His eyes opened a little when he saw Ben, then closed again from pain. Ben dropped to his knees. "Oh no," he whispered. He gently reached for the trap. "Hang in there, buddy." The first dog stood close by, watching everything with quiet worry. Ben worked fast. He had dealt with traps before, but this one was old and stiff. After a minute of hard pulling, the trap finally opened with a loud snap. The dog let out a small yelp, but his body didn't move. Ben checked the injury. It was bad, but not hopeless. "You found me for this, didn't you?" Ben said, glancing up at the first dog. "You brought me here to save your friend." The dog wagged his tail once, slowly. Ben picked up the injured dog as gently as he could and stood up. "Come on, both of you. Let's get help." He turned and started walking back through the forest. The first dog followed closely, never leaving his friend's side. When they reached the truck, Ben carefully placed the injured dog inside and opened the back seat for the other one. "I don't know who you two are," Ben said, "but you're coming with me now." As the truck rolled away down the forest road, Ben looked into the rearview mirror. The two dogs were quiet, but something told him this was only the beginning. Ben didn't waste any time. As soon as he got back to town with the two German shepherds, he called the nearest vet clinic. The injured dog needed help fast. His leg was badly wounded, and he was losing a lot of blood. "Please," Ben told the receptionist on the phone, "it's urgent. I found this dog stuck in a trap deep in the woods. He won't survive without treatment." The vet, a kind woman named Dr. Emily, agreed to meet Ben right away. Within minutes, Ben drove the dogs to the clinic. Dr. Emily and her assistant rushed outside with a stretcher. They gently carried the injured dog inside while the other one, the one that had led Ben into the forest, waited near the clinic door. His eyes followed every move, full of worry for his friend. While Dr. Emily worked on the injured dog in the treatment room, Ben sat with the other one in the waiting area. The dog sat quietly beside him, resting his head on Ben's boots. His body was still dirty and thin, but his loyalty was clear. Ben noticed a metal tag hanging from the dog's collar. He carefully held it up and read the words, K9 Ranger, military dog. His eyes widened. "You're a military dog?" he whispered, surprised. This wasn't just someone's pet. This dog had been trained to work with soldiers, probably in the army or police. Ben immediately made a call to the local army base. He gave them the name and number on the tag. After a short wait, someone on the other end finally said, "That dog, Ranger, belonged to Sergeant Dan Carter, but Sergeant Carter has been missing for over a year." Ben felt a chill run down his spine. "Missing?" he repeated. "Yes," the officer replied. "He went out on a private mission, and we lost contact. We searched, but nothing. We thought he was gone. So was his dog." Ben looked down at the German Shepherd sitting beside him. Ranger. This brave animal had survived a whole year in the wild, and had just led him to another injured dog, who might have a deeper connection to all of this. Dr. Emily came out of the treatment room and gave Ben a small smile. "He's stable now. The leg is badly hurt, but he'll live. You got there just in time." Ben nodded in relief. "Thank you." Later, Ben brought both dogs home with him. His cabin wasn't fancy, but it was warm and safe. He made a soft bed for the injured dog and cleaned him up gently, taking care not to touch the sore leg too much. The second dog stayed close the whole time, refusing to rest until he saw his friend breathing calmly. As the days passed, Ben noticed something. The younger dog, the one who had been trapped, was quiet and weak, but he always tried to stand whenever Ranger moved. He refused to eat unless Ranger was nearby. He followed Ranger like a shadow, so Ben gave him a name, Shadow. It fit perfectly. Ben would often sit on his porch and watch the two dogs resting side by side. He didn't know what they had been through, or how long they had been alone in the forest, but it was clear they shared a deep bond. Maybe they were more than just trained animals. Maybe they were each other's family. And something about Ranger's behavior still puzzled Ben. The dog wasn't fully at peace. He often stood by the window, staring at the woods, ears up, tail still. It was as if he was waiting for something, or someone. It had been a few quiet days since Ben brought Ranger and Shadow home. The dogs were healing slowly. Shadow's leg was still weak, but Dr. Emily said he would recover with time and care. Ranger, however, was acting different. He never seemed to relax. He would sit by the window for hours, staring out toward the forest. Sometimes he would stand up and bark suddenly, as if he heard something no one else could hear. Other times, he paced back and forth, whining softly. Ben watched Ranger closely. "What is it, boy?" he asked one evening. "Is someone out there?" The next morning, something changed. Ranger walked up to Ben, barked once, and then walked toward the door. He looked back, his eyes full of meaning. Ben felt a chill. It was like Ranger was asking him to come. "You want me to follow you?" Ranger barked again. Ben grabbed his coat, flashlight, and a water bottle. Shadow tried to stand too, but Ben gently patted his head. "You stay here and rest, buddy. I'll be back." Ranger led Ben deep into the forest. They walked for over an hour, stepping over fallen logs and through thick bushes. The trees grew taller and closer together. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, just the sound of Ben's boots and Ranger's careful steps. Finally, Ranger stopped near a group of tall pine trees. Hidden behind thick vines and branches was an old wooden cabin. Ben stepped closer. The door was slightly open, creaking as he pushed it. Inside, the air was dusty and cold. It looked like no one had been there for a long time, but the place was not empty. On the floor was a rolled-up army sleeping bag. On the table sat a stack of books, dog training manuals, maps, and an old flashlight. A military backpack leaned against the wall. And then Ben saw it. A small leather journal sitting beside a tin can of food. He picked it up and flipped through the pages. The handwriting was neat, but tired. The first pages talked about setting up camp, training the dogs, and watching for signs of people. As he read further, the tone of the writing changed. The last page gave Ben chills. Day 402. Ranger keeps watching the woods. I think something's out there. I haven't seen anyone for months, but I can't leave. Not yet. Ben stood there in silence, heart beating faster. Day 402, he whispered. That meant whoever wrote this had been here for well over a year. That person wasn't just camping. They were hiding. He looked at Ranger, who sat quietly by the door, watching him. Was this your owner? Ben asked softly. Was this Sergeant Carter's place? Everything made sense now. The journal, the training books, the gear. This cabin had belonged to Sergeant Dan Carter. And Ranger hadn't just been wandering the forest. He had been trying to guide someone back here. Ben looked around the cabin one more time. He could almost feel the weight of loneliness in the room. What had Carter been running from? Why was he hiding here for so long? And more importantly, where was he now? The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the trees. Birds chirped again in the forest, like the woods were waking up after a long silence. Ben couldn't stop thinking about the journal he had found in the hidden cabin. The words, Day 402, kept echoing in his mind. Who was this man who had stayed in the forest for so long? Why hadn't anyone found him? He packed a bag with food and water and called Ranger. Come on, boy, he said. Let's go back. Maybe we'll find something. Or, someone. Ranger barked once and wagged his tail. It was like he knew this trip was important. Together they walked back into the forest, retracing their steps. It took nearly an hour to reach the cabin. But something felt different this time. The air was heavier. The trees were quiet again. As they neared the cabin, Ranger suddenly stopped. His ears went up, and his tail stood stiff. He stared into the trees. Then Ben saw it too. A man was standing just beyond the clearing. He was thin, very thin, with a long beard and torn army jacket. His boots were worn out, and his face was pale and tired. He looked like he hadn't seen another human in months. The man stepped forward slowly. His eyes locked on Ranger. For a moment, nobody said a word. Then the man's face crumpled, and he dropped to his knees. His voice cracked. Ranger, is that really you? Ranger ran forward and gently licked the man's face. The man wrapped his arms around the dog, tears falling freely. I thought you were dead, he whispered, pressing his forehead against Ranger's. I thought I lost you forever. Ben watched quietly, heart full. He stepped closer. Are you Sergeant Dan Carter? The man nodded slowly, still holding Ranger. Yes, I was with him when everything went wrong. They sat outside the cabin as Sergeant Carter slowly told his story. Over a year ago, during a special mission, things had gone bad. Carter and his 2 dogs had been separated from the rest of the unit. He got injured and couldn't reach help. For days, he wandered with no food, no medicine. "I thought if I stayed in one place, someone would find me," he said. But nobody came. Ben asked, "Why didn't you try to leave the forest?" Carter looked down. "I was weak. I thought I was dying, so I made the hardest choice. I told Ranger and Shadow to go. I thought they'd have a better chance without me." His voice broke. "But I never stopped missing them. Not a day went by." Ben placed a hand on Carter's shoulder. "Ranger never gave up on you. He brought me here." Carter wiped his tears, smiling weakly. "He's a good boy. The best." Ben helped Carter stand. "You don't have to hide anymore. Let's go home." Carter hesitated, looking around at the quiet cabin. "Home," he whispered, like it was a word he hadn't heard in years. Ben smiled. "You've got 2 dogs waiting, and maybe a fresh start." Ben brought Sergeant Dan Carter back to his small home near the forest. At first, Carter looked nervous. He hadn't been around people in a long time. The lights felt too bright. The sounds of cars, voices, and even a ringing phone made him flinch. But there was one thing that made him feel safe: Ranger. Ranger never left his side. Wherever Carter sat, Ranger sat beside him. At night, when Carter had bad dreams, Ranger would gently nudge him awake with his nose. The dog would lie next to him, like he was saying, "It's okay now. I'm here." Shadow, the younger dog, also stayed close. He was stronger now, eating well, running around the backyard, and wagging his tail more each day. He often lay next to Carter and rested his head on the soldier's lap, bringing him comfort and calm. Ben gave Carter his space, but made sure he had everything he needed: warm food, clean clothes, and a quiet place to rest. Some days were hard. Carter didn't speak much. Other days, he shared stories from the army. Stories about courage, loss, and the bond between a soldier and his dogs. As the weeks passed, Carter began to change. He smiled more often. He walked with the dogs every morning. He even helped Ben repair things around the house. Day by day, the broken soldier was slowly healing, thanks to love, peace, and the loyalty of 2 amazing dogs. One morning, Ben brought Carter a letter. It had a golden seal from the army. Carter opened it with shaking hands. As he read it, his eyes filled with tears. The army had learned what had happened, how he had survived alone in the forest for over a year, how his dog Ranger had never given up, and how they were finally reunited. They were holding a ceremony to honor him. At first, Carter didn't want to go. "I'm no hero," he said. "I just did what I had to do." But Ben placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're more than a hero, and Ranger deserves to be seen too." On the day of the ceremony, Carter wore a clean uniform. His beard was trimmed, and his eyes looked brighter than they had in a long time. He walked onto the stage with Ranger beside him, tail wagging proudly, head held high. The crowd clapped, some even cried. The officer giving the award said, "Sergeant Dan Carter reminds us of the courage not just in battle, but in survival, and Ranger reminds us of what loyalty truly means." The medal was placed on Carter's chest, and another one, smaller, was placed on Ranger's collar. After the ceremony, people came to shake Carter's hand and pet the brave dogs. Shadow barked happily and wagged his tail. In the weeks that followed, Carter decided to use his experience to help others. He began working at a rescue center, helping train dogs for search and rescue missions. He taught them how to find lost hikers, detect danger, and most importantly, how to stay loyal and calm in stressful times. Ben, Carter, Ranger, and Shadow became a little family. They lived together in peace, surrounded by nature and love. Every night, they sat on the porch together, the stars above, the quiet forest around them, and the dogs lying peacefully at their feet. They had all been through something hard, but together, they had found something even stronger: hope, healing, and a second chance.